You know what? I will say this though. After the last week's episode, I, in my mind, have made the decision that LeBron to me is the greatest of all time, which is a
Wow. Okay.
huge
Hot
statement
take.
in my mind. But it's a hot take for me too because I think Kobe's the greatest basketball player, but
Okay.
LeBron is, in my opinion, the greatest athlete of all time because of what he's done from being more
Mm,
than an athlete perspective. And
okay.
I also understand that like Jordan lived through a very different time where some of these things weren't as culturally accepted and white America wasn't ready to hear what the fuck he had to say if he was going to
True.
say it. But I think the fact that LeBron has never been afraid to make less money in order to have a cultural impact.
That is
Um,
very true.
and Jordan wasn't prepared to make less money in order to have a
Yeah.
cultural impact. And I think you can be the greatest for having 6 rings and having this crazy drive, but I think the person that will be remembered in 100 years is going to be the person that gave back and said what needed to be said, and stood up for what he believed, even if it meant millions of people aren't going to buy your sneakers because they don't rock with it. So
Yeah.
that completely changed it for me. I was like, oh, I never knew this side of Jordan. I never knew that he didn't take a stance where he needed to, and then he actually flat out said like white people or Republicans buy sneakers too. Like
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. That's almost unheard of. And if an athlete said that in today's world, the backlash on that comment would be like
Could you imagine
crazy.
if LeBron James said Republicans buy sneakers too? He would get destroyed. But I also
Yeah.
understand LeBron is living in a time where standing up for culturally important things and
Mm,
racial divide is more generally accepted than in the early 90s where the Rodney King riots were still happening and like these things were
definitely.
still a little bit more prevalent in the USA. Definitely still
Yeah.
so though.
Yeah, definitely. People are definitely more woke in today's world. But that's a really interesting perspective. I've never heard that argument before, the one that you just presented, because it's such a hot topic and people debate over it so much. And I've never heard that like perspective on it. And I agree with you because that he's definitely gone above and beyond being just an athlete. And I think he's one of the best role models for kids too, obviously. He doesn't really have much
100%.
blemishes on his record off the court. He has some, but
Yeah, nothing too crazy. And I think it also like even what he's done with the I Promise School, which I'm not sure if you've seen the show on Quibi, but you just get to learn so much about what he believes in and what he's stood up for, and all the things he's made a priority in his life. Um, and yeah. So big kudos to LeBron James because I always used to be like back when it was like LeBron versus Kobe. I always used to be Kobe, 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 Kobe. I always
yeah.
used to hate LeBron when he left Cleveland. I was like, man, this guy's a snake.
Mm,
But then now, as I get older, I start to appreciate the leadership, the wisdom, the greatness, the philanthropy, the just all around greatness that he is. And so I always like,
yeah.
watching the Jordan thing has actually made me be like, holy shit, we have this guy right in front of us and we don't appreciate him like we
Yeah.
should. Like, this is the greatest player, arguably, that we've ever seen in the history of the game playing right the fuck now. And, we're not looking at him or thinking of him the way that we are this guy who played 25 years ago.
Yeah, very true. And it brings it back to that point that you made. It's gonna be like 100 years from now where you realize like this guy was insane, and so many people hate on him, which is crazy. Like I don't know, like it's people hate on him, but people love to hate on the best. So it's just one of
Always.
those things. Awesome. Well, let's roll right into it from there.
Fuck yeah.
Zach, welcome to Ambiance podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. You're checking in from Toronto, Canada, right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. How are you holding up out there with the whole crisis that's going on?
Doing well. I mean, we're very fortunate over here that being in the content industry, we haven't been too drastically affected from a business perspective.
Mm,
Most of my direct family and loved ones are like, okay, and they're getting through it. And so, yeah, overall, just trying to do what we can to help others that aren't as fortunate and are going through tougher times, but blessed to be able to be in a good position through this right now.
gotcha. I love to hear it. For those of you guys listening who don't know who Zach Honarvar is that how you pronounce Honarvar?
Close, Hanavar.
Honarvar.
H-O, like Hanavar.
Honarvar. Okay, I just want to make sure I got that straight before I butchered it anymore. But yeah, for those of you guys listening, Zach Honarvar, he's the founder of Day One Entertainment and manager of Yes Theory, who, if you didn't know, is this amazing group of individuals on YouTube that travel the world, set challenges for themselves. I absolutely love their videos myself. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Um, there's a lot that I definitely want to get into, but I feel like you can't just really not talk about what's happening around in the world right now. What do you think has changed for you the most with the crisis that's hit?
That's a good question. I think the thing that has changed the most for me, in all honesty, is probably the amount of time I spend trying to check in on my mom and dad. Um, I used to probably talk to my mom and dad maybe once a week on FaceTime or something like that, and now I'm like almost every day, every 2 days. And I don't really know, like, I started finding myself at first being like more so wanting to check on in on them, making sure they're okay. And then I kind of realized, like, why am I leaving a week before like I talk to them again? Like, why was I ever doing that in the first place? Like,
Oh,
my time with them is so short. They're older. My dad is 70, my mom's 67. Um, my dad's in Iran, which is, at least
oh,
when this
wow.
started, was like a hotspot for Corona. And my mom's out here in Toronto as well. So that's honestly been the biggest like change that I think will go on past anything is like, oh my God, I wasn't giving my parents the time of day. And I still considered myself someone that put time with my family and parents on as a priority, but
Right.
definitely have taken that to another level and making sure that like, oh, these are the things that I was just so busy that I was like, oh, I don't have time to give a 30-minute call to my dad today. But now I'm like, no, that comes
Yeah.
before other things. And I'm gonna book that in my calendar like I do, meetings with the CEO or anything.
Yeah, and it's making you realize what's really important in life. Like everything was literally kind of stripped from us, and then you're left with what really matters. And then you're like, "Wow, I've been blind this whole time." And that's kind of like the feeling that you've been having, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I think it really put things in perspective and reminded me like what matters when everything else, like you said, is stripped away. Like,
Yeah,
when all that kind of stuff is on pause and shit is on pandemic mode, like the people that I truly care about are my mom, my sister, my dad, my family. So those are the closest to me, and I've always had them since the day I was alive, like, born. So
yeah,
checking in on them and making sure they're okay has been something that I had forgotten. Like, oh shit, it shouldn't take a pandemic for me to do
yeah.
this. This should have
Very
been
true.
something I was doing regardless.
Yeah, and it's something that you're gonna take with you, like past whenever everything's over, right?
100%. I'm honestly gonna just like start going around telling people like, yo, I talk to my mom or dad like every day, every other day.
Yeah,
And I want to start feeling weird if I go like 3-4 days without talking to them. I want that to feel like, going 3-4 days without a workout starts
yeah.
feeling weird. Like, oh, I feel like a lazy bum. I
Mhm.
feel like after 3-4 days of not talking to my parents, I want to start being like, oh, that feels weird. I feel like my priorities are out of sync here.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel like that with my parents and also with like long lost friends kind of. I've been able to repair a lot of friendships that uh kind of we got out of touch before. And yeah, it's like I've talking to some of my friends in the recent month or two more than I've talked to them in the past like 5 years, which is like insane to think about. So I think
Yeah.
what you just said can also be applied to different relationships in your life that hold value to you, you know?
For sure. I mean, when this first started happening, one of the things, like probably like week one of quarantine, like I was never someone who like this drastically hit and I got into like a funk or got really down. Like I was able to like kind of try to stay level headed and try to see silver linings and all that. And then one day I was feeling particularly down. I was like, this is just so worrying. I don't know where this is going to go. What is this going to mean from a business perspective? What is this going to mean from like my family perspective? And so I sat down and I looked at all my 2020 goals. I do yearly goals every single year. And I was like, I'm going to isolate the ones that I can do during quarantine. Because I changed my mindset from like, yo, this is a thing we're going to get out of in a couple of weeks to like, I'm expecting to be in this shit for at least 6 months.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, knowing that, what would I do differently with these 2020 goals? And so I isolated the ones I could do during quarantine. And one of the goals that had been on my list for the past probably 3 years and has never been completed was improving my relationship with my sister.
Okay.
She's 12 years older than me. We've gone through like periods of being super close and periods of like not being close at all.
Mm.
And more recently haven't been that close. And so then I was like, you know what, I can do this during quarantine. We can FaceTime, we can get closer. And I feel like, in the past 2 months, we've become closer and stronger in our relationship than we have in many, many years in the past. Um, So that definitely worked for me too, like looking at those things. And like you said, whether it's a family member, whether it's friends of yours that you haven't been able to chat with, I think it's provided space for us to do that. And because it doesn't require physical proximity to do that, because it doesn't matter, you could be in LA with someone and you still need to FaceTime them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter whether that person's out in New York or out in Asia or out in Europe. You can work on those long distance relationships really, really well. So that's kind of been a huge success story. Well, if not the most important success story I've had in quarantine thus far.
Hell yeah. I think that's awesome too that you have these goals that you do every year and you make it a point to put in some personal goals for yourself. I think when people think about goals, they might, because everyone's so stuck on the grind. Like our world is really competitive right now, so you're just like always focused on your career and goals that like are going to take you to the next level in your career path, which whatever that may be. But the fact that you throw some personal goals in there as well, and that obviously shows like how much of a value you put on your family and probably your friendships as well, right?
For sure. Actually, like I actually split my life up into every year into 6 to 8 categories.
Okay.
And some of those are work. Some of those, like to name some of them off for you, is like mindfulness, health and fitness, financials, like one day entertainment. And yes, there will be like one of those pillars, family. Um, and I'll have some other ones in there like self improvement and development, and I'll make just certain goals for that. So I try to make sure that I have goals for all these different compartments in my life. And then we'll actually, on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, draw like a wheel, break it up into 8 little points, and then rate myself 1 out of 10 in all those compartments. And the whole point is like, if it's all 10 out of 10, then you have a wheel, and I call it the wheel of life. And then if you have like a 10 in work, but you have a 2 in family, and then you have a 6 in health and fitness, and then you have a 3 in mindfulness, if you pretend that's a wheel, it's going to clunk, right? Like it's not going to
Right.
roll perfectly. So the goal is to try to get all of them at 10. And I'd be lying if I said I ever had a month or a week where they were all at 10. But that's like and then you see kind of like, some weeks you're like, I did call my parents every day, and I did like, I feel like that relationship is strong. Cool. That's at 8, 9, 10. And then this week I forgot to work out, so that's lower. And then maybe the next week it changes, but that helps me
Oh,
keep a more balanced approach to my life. And it also helps me realize like, if something is not within these 8 categories, it is not a priority for this year.
okay.
And so it helps me have like this driving force that these things are important in my life, and things that fall outside of these categories are not a priority. Doesn't mean like, partying is not on there, my social life is not on there, doesn't mean it's not important, but it means that like when I'm faced with the dilemma of like, do I go out and party or do I go do this thing, well, this thing has been one of these 8 categories in my life that's a driving force, and so I'm going to give up the party to go do this
Okay. Man, where did you come up with that? That's a really interesting
thing. it was
method.
um it was a thing that I pieced together from a couple of different goal setting strategies. Part of it, the wheel of life, I think comes from Tony Robbins,
Okay.
and then the goal setting part of it. I mean, I can get really into it, but what I do is I basically I write a bunch of goals as a huge list, and then I go through the list like a week or two later and cross out everything that I feel like I wrote down that was just like some shit that felt nice to say that I don't actually give a fuck about doing.
Yeah.
Like I might write down like I want to learn Spanish. Then I like really look at it 2 weeks later. I'm like, do I really fucking want to learn Spanish, or was that just some shit that sounded nice like 2 weeks ago? And
Yeah.
so I break it down. I like filter it, and then I quantify everything. So
Okay.
when I write, I want a better relationship with my mom. That is, what the fuck does that mean? And so I try to be like, well, what does that mean? Okay, so one call every other day is what I think the quantified version of having a good relationship with my mom is. Plus one big vacation a year where I take my mom on a trip. That to me is like quantifying better relationship with my mom. So things like that, even when I say like I want to mindfulness, I want to become more mindful, or I want to practice more meditation, I actually calculate the minutes in a year that I want to meditate. I just
Wow.
take like, hey, if I meditate 10 minutes every other day for 365 days, it's this many minutes. So that's going to be my goal. I can do
So
10 minutes every other day.
that's super important. So you're just like you're actually when you set a goal in mind, you're giving yourself tangible action steps to get towards that goal rather than just having the goal out there.
Exactly. And then I get really
Okay.
fucking meticulous about it, and I break it down into half a year, a quarter, and a month. So if I say I want to meditate every other day for 10 minutes a day or 10 minutes every other day, and that adds up to this many minutes a year. I'm really bad at mental math, so I'm not even going to try. Then I go, okay, cool. What is that in 6 months? What is that in 3 months, in a quarter? And then what is that every single month? And then I try to look at the end of every single month and be like, am I on track? Am I on track to do these things? Have I been calling my mom once every 2 days? And I'm totally cool with like, there's been times where I'll start a goal out and then 6 months later, I'm like, you know what? I haven't been running like I said I was going to start running. And then why not? Like, is it still a priority for me? Or was it one of those like, oh, I want to learn Spanish things where like I had said this was super cool, but like when I got into it, I realized like, yo, this isn't actually bringing me the value that I thought it would have.
Right.
And so I'm okay with like taking things and pulling them out and being more flexible with them. Some things I don't do that. Like I would never do that with like making a strong relationship with my mom. And then also what I do early January is I write something called a look back statement where, like, let's say this past January, I wrote as if it was December 31st, 2020. And I write about every compartment of those 8 compartments that I told you about as if I had completed that goal. And I write about what my life is like now that I've done that. And so I write like, you know, me and my mom are stronger than ever. And she, you know, is super proud of her son. And she feels like she can trust within me any secret that she has or anything that she wants to tell me. You know, with my health and fitness, I write like, you know, I'm super confident taking my shirt off at the beach, and I feel like I'm in the best shape of my life, and I feel like I've built strong habits in fitness. And that every time, what it's supposed to do anyway, from what I've learned, is every time throughout the process, you're like, fuck man, I don't want to go to the gym, or fuck man, like I'm busy today, I don't have time to call mom. You remember what you felt like when you had done the thing, because now you know you've written as if it has happened, and it reminds you like, oh damn, like I want that. I want to be able to take my shirt off at the beach. I want to be able to like have my mom confine secrets within me, and then that should keep you going.
So that's kind of like a reflection process for you at the end, right?
So you're writing that ahead of time.
Oh, you're writing that ahead of time. Okay.
So you're writing that back in You're writing that in January
okay.
as if you already succeeded.
Okay. Wow.
So you're almost manifesting it.
So, okay, I was going to ask you, what's the method behind that? You're manifesting it, like speaking it into existence.
Yeah, I think you're speaking it into existence and manifesting it, but also you feel it when you write it. Like when you write, like, you know, my mom is so proud of me and she feels like she can tell me everything and yada, yada, yada. Like there's a part of you that feels how good that is going to be. And so that's the thing that you'll go back to when you're struggling through it. Or like when you write like, yo, I'm super fit, I got a 6-pack and I take my shirt off at the beach and I'm super confident with my body. You're like, wow, that fucking feels good. Yeah. And then when you're at the gym struggling your ass off and it feels like shit, then you're like, oh man, remember, oh, it would feel so good if I could like be confident enough to take my shirt off at the beach. And then that keeps you going. So it reminds you, apparently through, and this was through like Tony Robbins and all these people that I've read this through, that by doing that, you are putting it into your body, what it will feel like once you complete it. And then you'll remember those things and that feeling when you're struggling through the tough points.
Okay. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That sounds like a recipe, like literally for life success. How long have you been doing that for?
Probably 4 years now.
4 years now. Okay. And since you've implemented it, how have you seen your life change? Is it like night and day? Night and day? Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, now it's so cool. Like I can go back 4 years ago and be like, what were my goals that year? And then see so many of them that I've done. Mm-hmm. And some years has been really scary, like in terms of how accurate the things ended up being, whether it was like making a certain amount of money, or, you know, Yes Theory has been a category on there for the past 3 years. So like so many of the business goals that we had wanted to attain with Yes Theory have been on there. So many of the health and fitness things, like, you know, I wanted to run a marathon, which 4 years ago seemed like this impossible thing. And now I've ran 2 of them. So yeah, night and day has changed the way I approach any goal in my life, because I think so many people just like, I'm a huge hater of people who just say shit.
Yeah. I mean,
so I just feel like so many people are like, yo, I want to do this thing. I'll have this big audacious goal, or I have this, whatever. I'm so meticulous and like, all right, cool. If you want to, you know, travel every country, or you want to meet 1 million, like help 1,000 strangers, or you want to do it. Okay, well that means if you want to help 1,000 strangers in a year, that means you got to around help 500 by the halfway point, which means you got to help about, you know, so like 250 by, you know, the first quarter, okay, so what the fuck are you doing tomorrow? Like tomorrow you got to be helping people. So like that's what I break everything down into, like some sort of thing that lets me know when I wake up tomorrow, what do I got to do? I'm a very firm believer in like that Will Smith saying where he's like, you don't wake up and build a house. You wake up and you plant a brick as perfectly as a brick can be placed. And then
Yeah.
if you do that every single day, you wake up one day and you're like, oh shit, I got a house. So that's kind of like the strategy here is like, if you can take everything and you break it down into as many half, quarter, 10%, 5%, 2%, 1% chunks, you wake up the next day, you just got to handle one day at a time, one day at a time, one day at a time. And then you
Yeah.
look back 365 days later and you go look at what your January goals were and you're like, oh shit, I did it.
Yeah.
I have that now.
I love that because you're just basically accomplishing these small tasks to get to the ultimate goal. And like you said, laying it brick by brick, it's all about getting 1% better every day. And if you get 1% better every day, 100 days from now, you're gonna be 100% better. You know, it's like, and it makes it
Exactly.
more realistic for you because there's this end goal that seems so impossible to reach. But if you set these little tasks for you to do every single day, it's way more realistic, and it also holds you accountable because if you didn't do those little tasks, you look at the end and be like, why didn't I reach this ultimate goal? Well, you didn't do those little things that you set for yourself to get there, so it must not have been that important for you, right?
Exactly. I'm a huge believer in long term consistency beats short term intensity. And that
Mm,
came actually a lot later in my life. Like growing up, I used to play a shit ton of basketball, and basketball was like my dream. I wanted to be in the NBA.
okay. No wonder
And
you have
then
so much knowledge.
yeah, until I realized that God didn't have those plans for me. I was 5'7" white Canadian, and I was like, I ain't going nowhere. But
Yeah.
but I remember like I used to have days where I was like super motivated, and I was like, I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna play 8 hours of basketball today. I'm gonna train. And then I wake up the next day, and maybe if I was like still super motivated, be like, I'm gonna train 6 hours today. And by the third day, I'm like waking up sore, tired, and being like, oh, I'm not feeling it anymore. Like I'm tired, I'm gonna take some days off. And then I would take a few days off and like wait until that motivation is built again and then go super hard and do the same thing. And then when I
Right.
grew up, I actually started realizing, even through like some of the teachings of Kobe, is like if I just train 3 hours every single day, 2 hours every single day, and maybe do 2 days of 2 hours every single day, well, one, I'm gonna be able to do that every single day, and then I'm not going to have the day where I wake up and be like, oh, this is like, I'm super tired, my body's sore, yada, yada, yada. Like if you don't exhaust yourself to 100% in these workouts, you're going to be able to show up consistently. And then if you take that person and compare them to the person that does the other way, which is like 8 hour training day, 6 hour training day, and then rest for 4 days, over the course of a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, the
Mm-hmm.
person who trains the 2 hours twice a day, every single day, is going to train more hours, and therefore more training, correlated to more success and better skill. That person's going to win. And
Yeah.
so it's about building systems. And I think again, talking about LeBron, it's like if your goal is to be the best player in the world, well, how are you going to train when you achieve being the best player in the world?
True.
This off season, I was watching. I was talking to a friend about this. I was watching LeBron James post stories in the off season at 4 o'clock in the morning, waking up and going to the training, like to train, and no one was fucking talking about this. I was like, dude, it's fucking August, and
Yeah.
LeBron James waking up at 4 in the morning to go do a morning workout, and then I'd see him do another workout in the afternoon, and I was like, this guy's the best player in the world, and he's waking up in his off season at 4 in the morning. That doesn't make any sense. But his mindset is, I'm gonna build the habits and the systems to be the best version of myself, and not I'm gonna be the best player in the world.
Yeah.
Because then once he achieved that, it's like, oh, there's no reason to wake up at 4 in the morning tomorrow.
Yeah. Shit is literally like a formula. Like it's about working smarter, not harder as well, to the point that you just made.
Yeah.
Are you a Raptors fan? Were you happy about them winning the
I have a
finals?
tattoo on my
Oh,
arm that I got with my mom at the parade.
oh
Huge
shit.
Raptors fan. I went to Game 5, hoping that they'd take it in Game 5. I flew all the way back to Toronto, dropped more money than I'm willing to admit on the tickets to go see Game 5, and then they lost last second. But it's all good. I stayed in Toronto and celebrated when they won Game 6.
Damn, that's an awesome moment for you. I think that this is gonna go down. Maybe its history as like the first team to be. They're the champions for 2 years straight. Like since it
I'm
got
glad. I'm glad
canceled.
you said it, dude. We're still reigning champs.
Yeah, still reigning champs. Switching gears here a little bit. That was just the intro. Thank you for that. You gave us dropped so many gems in that just small snippet. What about creatively? Because I feel like right now a lot of people have creative blocks, and it's hard to be inspired right now, just sitting inside your house. So, what are some things you're doing to stay creative and find inspiration during this time?
That's a really good question. Um, what am I doing to find inspiration during this time? I think consuming information, like being smart about the information that you're consuming, has a drastic effect on your creativity and your mood. Like if you're sitting at
Okay.
home googling coronavirus 40 times a day, then I bet you your feeling of creativity is going to lack, and your feelings of fear, doom, gloom, and all that shit is going to like be really prevalent in your mind.
Yes,
There's
yes.
like a very high correlation between the amount of news you consume and like how uh, optimistic or pessimistic your view is on the world. So I think just being really smart about what you consume. And I'm not saying like don't stay informed on what's happening going on, but be very smart with like the news channels that you are watching and like paying attention to. And like it's really smart to even pick like one or two outlets that like you trust, and just being like, I'm only gonna look at the outlets from like this particular publication, and I don't give a fuck what Fox is gonna say,
Right.
for example.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I think that that's really important. And then like making sure that you're spending your time reading the right things, consuming the right type of even music. Like I feel like music is it's like when you break up with someone or you go through a nasty breakup, you listen to fucking sad John Mayer songs all the time, you're going to be like in that feeling of like, oh,
Yeah.
sadness just over, over a longer period of time. Whereas if you listen to happy, uh, you don't have to call by Usher, then you're like, oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
So I think that affects creativity. And I think
Okay.
honestly, the faster you can get into the stages of acceptance, like the longer you stay in like the fuck man, why did this thing have to come into the world? And
Like, why me?
yeah, yeah, the longer you stay in the why me, and the faster you get into the like the this is happening whether I fucking like it or not. So I better just make the most of it and actually start planning out what this is going to do and
Hmm.
the effects it's going to have. And then even go into your, if you want to make a worst case scenario, or if you want to make like the whatever case scenario, and then plan accordingly, then you are in control and you
Okay.
feel in control. Whereas like if it's always like I have no idea what tomorrow is going to look like, and oh my god, who knows where we're going to be in a month, and yada yada, then it's like you're just sitting here and the world is punching you around and throwing you around. But I think if you can start to make educated guesses, then you feel like, okay, here's what I think is going to happen, and
Okay.
here's what I'm going to do about it, and here's how I'm going to pivot my business, or I'm going to pivot my lifestyle, or I'm going to pivot my habits to fit what I think is going to happen. And then you just kind of go at it, and then you're like, okay, I'm in control. I'm going to do what I can and make the most out of this.
So I have a solid game plan to deal with things. Okay. To touch on what you said earlier, there's an old saying, or just the saying that's been around for a while, is just like you are who your friends are, or you're choosing your friends is choosing your future. Do you think the same goes for like content? Like the content you surround yourself with kind of shapes who you are. You think that kind of goes hand in hand?
That's really interesting. I've never thought of that because I am a huge believer in you are the product of the five people you spend the most time with. Um, and I do agree. I think you are probably a product of the different types of content that you listen to or watch or listen to.
Consume. Yeah.
Like, and I think that's like, you know, if I were to show you, that's like the same thing as that if you show me the five people you spend the most time with, but I have no idea who the person is, right? You're just showing me the five friends around them. I bet you people can make pretty educated guesses on what type of person that person is, right?
Yeah. 100%.
But if I showed you five pro athletes, super fitness, hard work, like people who are just super shredded and in shape, and fitness is the number one priority. And I was like, who do you think is the person that spends time with all these five people? You'd be like, I bet they're pretty fucking fit and
Yeah.
they're shredded and they're like fitness is a huge part. You'd probably be right. If I showed
Hmm.
you someone who sat around and watched Fox News all day and other things within their life, or listen to sad songs, or ate popcorn and whatever, you'd probably have a good idea of like that person. Whereas if I
Yeah.
showed you someone that like watches master classes and watches TED Talks and writes on in their
Yeah.
journal and reads 50 pages a day, meditates, you'd have a different idea. So I think more so than even the content you consume, I think it's obviously just based on strong habits.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's not talked about enough. Just because a lot of social media is still kind of new to where people don't really talk about like how important the content that you consume is. And like I love that you brought that up. And it goes to like anything, you know, that's why companies advertise to interests and behaviors, because it tells a story about you and like your buying habits, right? So like the person's on Facebook, they like this, they engage with this, they're showing different ads than somebody else, right? So it's definitely something that people realize from companies about consumerism. And yeah, it's crazy. It's just really interesting to see.
Yes, that's a really clever way to look at it, especially even with like, you know, if we were to say, you know, these five people or like this person spends X amount of time on Instagram. I think it's like an indication of something, but I also think like if we can get more particular with what is the person consuming on Instagram. So I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of people that like hate on people spending a shit ton of time on social media, which sure I agree to. Like you shouldn't be wasting your days away just like consuming all this content.
Mhm.
But it also depends what you're consuming, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
consuming productive like content, or you know, it's a little bit harder on certain platforms than others, but it's still possible, and you know everything can have its purpose in your life for something. Like I probably spend 30 to 45 minutes a day watching TikTok because you know I find that to be a huge source of creativity boosting
Yeah.
content for me. It's actually to me like R&D for what I
Mm.
consider my job to be, and then it's fucking funny as hell, and
Yeah.
I find it hilarious, and like it's something I usually watch right before I go to bed. I'm like 30 minutes on TikTok and then I'm out to bed.
Yeah, you can find it. I guess it goes to that point. It kind of goes to what you use it for. Like, what are you using social media for? Like, in your sense, it kind of sounds like you're using it for inspiration, right, rather than consumption.
Inspiration, knowledge, just staying on top of what's going on, and you know, it's almost like this is kind of a cheesy example, but like it's kind of like watching game tape, I guess. It's like I want to
Yeah.
know how people are using these platforms creatively and who's doing what and who's having success, you know, who's approaching it from what perspective, and then using that to be like, hey, when I'm going and chatting with the S Theory guys about what our TikTok strategy is, I can be like, well, these guys are doing this thing and it's working and it's doing really well. And I think that fits us really well. So let's kind of like take pieces from this and take pieces from that.
Yeah, it translates exactly to sports. Like literally, like you said, watching film. Like the best players study. They take moves from different people. Like coaches take plays from different coaches to and then use
Yep.
it to get to be successful. It's just part of the game.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, switching gears here to Yes Theory actually. So for those people who are listening right now who don't know what Yes Theory is, how would you explain it? And also, what is your role within Yes Theory?
for sure. So Yes Theory um, consists of three guys, Matt, Thomas, and Amar, who are all international. Matt is French, Thomas is Swedish, and Amar is Egyptian. And they make videos predominantly on the premise that the best things in life are outside of their comfort zone. Um, and so they spread this philosophy through a bunch of different mediums. Started off as being video, mostly on YouTube, and now has spread to like newsletters, and the podcast comes out at the end of this month, and a bunch of different mediums like that we're working on, like written and what a book could look like, and events. We've done physical events. And so my role within that is I'm their manager. So I handle like a lot of the business, structural, organizational stuff within that process, allowing them to do what they do best, which is being the creatives, being the storytellers, being the leaders of the movement that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Yes Theory, you know, broader than that is a philosophy. And it's a philosophy that anyone, despite your age, despite your background, despite what country you're from, can live their life by as well. So we have, you know, people that are 60 years old following the Yes Theory. We have people that are 15 years old. You know, one person being from an upper class family in you know the Hamptons, and you know someone in a poor developing country following that same Yes Theory, and they all believe that by actively seeking discomfort and putting yourself in positions that make you uncomfortable, that you'll grow and develop further to your fullest potential.
Mm.
And that discomfort can be, you know, facing your fear of heights, or it can be, you know, facing the discomfort of calling a friend that you haven't talked to in a very long time and letting them know that you miss them, or calling your mom up and when it's not Mother's Day like it is today, and letting her know like, hey, I really appreciate you, I
Yeah.
love you, and I'm really grateful for everything that you've done for me. Those are sometimes uncomfortable things to do, but if we do them, we come out on the other side better people.
Yeah. And you're just setting challenges basically that are attacking those. So I know that Yes 3 has a really cool story behind how it formed. So I'd kind of like to hear that from you firsthand if you be so gracious to tell that story.
Sure. I won't get too into the weeds of it, but they all met in Thomas and Matt's last year of university, and they kind of bonded over the premise that they felt pretty unfulfilled with life and school and where it had left them. I think they thought that, doing 4 years at a really prestigious university would like make them feel like they knew what the hell they should be doing. But I
Hmm.
think like many, like soon to be graduates of university, they feel like unprepared for what real life is going to hold in store for them and how to navigate it. And so they all met and then started this thing called Project 30, where they were like, why don't we do 30 things we've never done in 30 days and we'll make a video about it every single day.
Mm.
And they did things like tried stand-up comedy or pierced one of their ears or learned how to synchronize skate
And
or
sorry to cut you off. What year was this when they started
oof,
that?
2015.
Okay.
2015, so 5 years ago. It's actually like the 5-year anniversary of this series right now,
Mm.
in June,
Happy
which
anniversary.
is, yeah, thanks. And so, yeah, so they started doing things like that, and they realized some things pretty quickly. They realized, one, we've never been happier than this ever in our lives. And two, this friendship that has formed has created stronger bonds with one another than some friendships that we've had for years and years. And we just met each other like 3 weeks ago. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And third from that was like we have 2,000 followers on this YouTube channel, and that probably at the time felt like a million.
Yeah.
And so that's what kind of led them to be like, let's actually not do what we had in store for our regular jobs, which they all had opportunities, whether working at prestigious companies or starting up their own apps or yada yada. And they were like, let's just see how far we can take this. And so they just kept doing it, kept doing things that got them out of their comfort zone, kept doing like these bucket list type items. And one thing led to the another. They got discovered by a studio out here in LA called Vertical Networks that was making content for Snapchat's Discover page,
Mm.
and then asked them to come out here, help them make content for Snapchat. And in the process, they got to kind of build their own brand through YouTube. And once the stint with Snapchat was over, they then kind of like doubled down on their own brand, and the rest is kind of history, I guess.
I love that they're not just like preaching the seek discomfort thing. They're actually like living testaments of it since the beginning too. And that's really important for people who are following to know that yeah, they're not just talking about it, they're actually doing these things in real life. And it makes it easier as an audience member probably to follow along. Would you agree?
Yeah, and to be honest, we constantly have to check ourselves too, because there's
That's important.
times right now where we're like, do we not want to do this thing, or do we not want to do this thing because it's uncomfortable? You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
we're starting a podcast, and oftentimes you might be like, should we do this way, or should we do this that way? Well, this way's a lot harder, but the return of it and what it could be and what it could stand for is a lot better than like just throwing a mic down and getting our friends in a room and like interviewing them.
Right.
Let's go the uncomfortable way, because I think the return from that will be far better than the other.
Okay.
And so we constantly find ourselves being like, oh shit, this is the discomfort. We're feeling it right now. And this is just our stage of discomfort and where you're at. I guess that's kind of the crazy thing with growth, life, and in general, is that there's constantly new discomfort that you could be facing. Like
Right.
Bill Gates and all these successful people and all whoever it might be, whatever stage they're at, there's something there for them that's uncomfortable that will push them to the next level. They just got to kind of find it and go after it.
Gotcha. Just being conscious of what's making you just uncomfortable and conquering that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it almost becomes like a habit and an addiction to discover what is making you uncomfortable, why it's making you uncomfortable, and then going after it and diving into it. Rather than what most people do from the get is like avoid it, put it
Yeah.
under the rug. I don't want to do that. I don't want to see that thing. It makes me uncomfortable.
Kind of like philosophic like aspect of looking at it. You guys could probably teach like a college course on like philosophy, like, you know?
Yeah, man, for sure. I mean, thinking about even like what the online course of it can look like.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. Um, Speaking from a more of a business standpoint for you, what were some of the challenges early on with Yes Theory, in just building a brand and building an audience and following? What are some of the challenges you faced in the beginning, and how did you overcome those?
That's a good question too. I think one of the challenges early on, and still kind of a challenge, is with Yes Theory in particular. Everything like the brand is so broad that there are so many good ideas of things to expand into. Like really early on, all it was a YouTube channel. And immediately we knew like, yes, there can be a podcast. Yes, there can be a book. Yes, there can be a festival. Yes, there can be a live event. It could be an online
Wow.
course. It could be like, we knew it could be all these things. But the fact that we knew it could be all those things made it really hard to pick which one of it could be.
Yeah.
And then you also have three guys versus just one guy, which is most like creators. And all of a sudden it gets like very like unclear what you should be a priority and what shouldn't. So that was pretty hard from the get-go, is deciding that, and still is sometimes a challenge. Sometimes you want to do like 10 things at once and then you spread yourself too thin. And then another thing that happens quite often is like, I'll give you an example. Like we might say, oh, you know what, it's going to be a podcast, let's go after a freaking podcast. And then you go, okay, cool, we're going to build the biggest fucking podcast in the world. And then you get like 3 months into building a podcast and you go, shit, this is really hard. And it's not as sexy as we once thought it was going to be when we were like, let's go build the biggest podcast in the world. And then you go look at the book and you're like, that looks so much sexier. Maybe we should have picked the book. And then you leave the podcast, go build the book. And then 3 months into writing a book, you're like, man, writing a book is not as sexy as it sounded when it was just an idea. And so
Yeah.
you kind of start to realize too, there's pretty and ugly phases in the development of starting something new. And there you have to like stay the course. There's like a point where like the work that you put in tips and you start to see the fruits of that labor.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a challenge. I think the other point of it was just like having multiple of the guys, like having three people that are very different, have three very different personalities. From my perspective as a manager who had never managed anyone before, managing three very different people was a challenge to know how to navigate their motivations and the things that got them to like uh, either get super motivated and inspired and happy, or for them to like shut off and hold things from me or like cause resentment and anger. And so I had to learn that 3 times, rather than with most people, with most managers they only learn that with one person.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I could see that how that is very challenging. Yeah, so at what point did you guys realize the potential that Yes Theory had and what it could be?
They knew it before I ever showed up.
Okay.
uh, there's actually a clip in episode 1 of the podcast, um, where it's a voice recording that they had from them being in a 1 bedroom apartment in Montreal, being like, we want to go do things, but we literally have $0 in our bank account. We have nothing that we can afford to do, but we want to make videos that are inspiring. And then I think Amar says it. He goes, one day this clip is going to be viewed by hundreds of thousands of people. And it's going
Nice.
to be the indication to people that you can start no matter what. And, even though right now we're struggling and we don't have any money and we don't have anyone watching us, no one gives a fuck about these three guys in this 1 bedroom apartment. One day they will. And this is going to be the clip that proves it. And it's like, 3, 4, 5 years later, holy shit, this clip is being used in the
That aged
start of a
nicely.
podcast that like probably 100,000 people are gonna listen to at some point or another.
Yeah.
So they knew it from the very beginning, and I think it's one of those traits with successful creators, talent, artists, athletes, is like that confidence in themselves before anyone else ever had a belief in them.
So they just kind of knew from the start. They just believed in themselves, which is one of the most important factors of following through.
100%, and they still do. They still do, even in the most bleak moments. The thing that never, uh, fades is their confidence in what Yes Theory will be and the movement will become.
Awesome. Very well said. So was there a potential like breakthrough moment? Like, was there like the first big thing that happened for Yes Theory that kind of can be thought of like a milestone for setting you guys off into what you guys are at now, where you guys are at now?
I think them and I would give different answers. I think for them it
Okay.
happened obviously earlier than I showed up. I think for them they would say it probably happened in during Project 30. They would probably, if I had to guess, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they would probably say it's like um, maybe when the mayor of Montreal decided to meet with them and like create a secret handshake. To them, there was no reason to do that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they had no following, they had no clout, there was no like reason for the mayor of Montreal to really care.
Right.
But very early on, he resonated with what they were trying to do from a philosophy standpoint. You can say kind of the same thing. Like one of the breakout moments would be like Will Smith responding to them and doing that. But I think the reason that that mayor of Montreal example is different is that Will Smith, not, I'm sure he did it because he believed in the philosophy as well, but Yes Theory also had almost 1 million followers on YouTube. They had clout on the platform that Will was joining, but
Mm.
that mayor of Montreal, he didn't have shit to gain from it. He was just helping three dudes out and he believed in their philosophy. So I think that kind of gave them a push really early on of like, this philosophy and this message that we believe in is what people will resonate with far beyond any other type of value that we can give them.
Okay.
um, for me, a breakout moment was we did this thing called Yes Theory Runs the World, where very early on when I first moved to LA, we started this challenge where we basically reached out to everyone in our audience and said, tomorrow, so in 24 hours, everyone go out and run a mile. And when you run that mile, take a video of yourself running that mile and like state what your mile signifies action towards in your life. Like, what is the thing you want to
Okay.
take action towards in your life? And that mile is going to signify you taking action towards it. And record that and send it into the Dropbox. And we wanted to get 24,901 people to fill out this pledge form that they had run a mile, because that was the circumference of the world.
Okay.
And at first, I remember being super skeptical because I was like, we don't even have 1 million followers on YouTube. How the fuck are we going to get 24,000 people to run a mile with 24 hours notice? And we woke up the next day and we had 27,000 pledge forms submitted.
Wow.
And we were like, holy fuck. And so, yeah, it was crazy. And we created this beautiful piece called Yes Theory Runs the World with all these amazing stories. I think, I don't want to say how many countries, I want to say it was like over 80 countries. I think we got the 27,000 pledge forms and like something like, I want to say 5,000, 6,000 videos submitted.
Wow.
And the piece was just so inspiring. And I remember, I think it was the first Yes Theory video that ever made me cry. And it really showed me like, holy shit, this is a movement. Like this really is a movement. It's not a channel. It's not
Yeah.
some funny, entertaining YouTube shit. It's a movement.
And it's bigger than you and like what all of you guys are at this point, right?
Yeah, and they're the first to know from the get. It's always bigger than them.
Mm.
It's bigger than all of us. It's about the community. It's about the philosophy. It's about what it stands for. They always to throw around the term that this is a 1,000-year project. Like this is an ideology that will live, hopefully, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And that the people that are 22 right now that are watching Yes Theory's YouTube channel, like one of the goals I think we have is that when they're 40 years old and they were raising kids, that they will teach this philosophy to their kids. We like hope that there's someone that's 22 years old right now that's watching Yes Theory videos every Sunday, that in 20 years they're going to have a kid and they're going to teach that kid like, hey, go after what makes you uncomfortable because it's going to make you happy in your life and it's going to make you develop and hit your potential in your life. Son, live the Yes Theory. If
Yeah.
we can do that, then like fuck the YouTube channel lasting 1,000 years. That's not what we're talking about. But it's the fact that like the lessons are going to be taught for years and years and years to come.
Yeah. I mean, how does that feel just changing that many lives on such a grand scale? Like, is it possible to fathom it? And do you take time to reflect on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. I wish we took more time to reflect on it. I think we do a decent job. Like we sometimes are like,
Mm.
holy shit. Um, we did our live event and we had 400 people on a rooftop in LA, and we were like, shit, 400 people looks like a lot when you see them all, seated, looking at you from a stage.
Yeah.
And we're like, wait a second, man, every YouTube video is getting like 1 million views. The fuck would that look like if everyone was like watching us from a stage? So then you're like,
Yeah.
you don't understand that these numbers are like, you kind of get numb to it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you kind of lose association to like what that really means. But I think like to the point of like what does that feel like? I think it's like, it's why you do it. It's 100% why you do it. It's why you wake up and you pull long nights, or when you like work tirelessly on a project, or when you're, why you do what we do. For
Right.
all of us, I think that's all like our why is for those things to be in place and for people to get that value for, generations hopefully to come.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. I mean, it's almost impossible to think of like if 1,000 people tangibly were watching you or 1,000,000 people were watching you, like it's hard to make the correlation between the two versus like them watching you behind a computer. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to put it in words, almost the emotions that it
Yeah.
brings. Um, Switching gears a little bit to One Day Entertainment. When did that start? And what is the concept behind it?
Yeah, so One Day Entertainment started with me deciding to quit my job and move out to LA to manage the guys. So it was, instead of me joining Yes Theory, I knew that like being a manager was something that fascinated me, and I wanted to do it, you know, at a larger scale and with more people. And my personal goal and my personal why has always been to like spread entrepreneurship and the lessons of entrepreneurship to people, and make them feel like they can be more entrepreneurial in whatever they're doing. Um, and so One Day Entertainment started out of that. The name came from the fact that like a lot of the big decisions I've ever made in my life have been made in one day. So the decision to quit my job and move to LA to manage yesterday was made in a day. The decision to quit my shitty finance job and join a startup called Shopify at the time
Oh
was made
shit.
in a day. So all these decisions were kind of made in a day. And so that's where the name came from. And so our goal is to treat creators and artists more like businesses and less like influencers, and that they need people who act like CEOs. They don't need people who act like agents.
Okay.
So that's kind of where it's come from. And Yes Theory is our first client, still predominantly where a majority of our time goes. Us being myself and Kate, who's like my right hand and has been for the past year and one day. And then now we started like kind of venturing into different places, venturing into the music industry, venturing into TikTok, and so kind of just trying our hands at different things and trying to like use this approach and this philosophy for the larger creator, artist, influencer space.
Okay. And when you say those decisions were made in one day, early on, what do you mean by that? Like, we're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna, I'm gonna just switch career paths, or was it just like an opportunity that presented itself that you wanted to capitalize on?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking for clarification, because I don't mean that like it was like a willy nilly like fuck it, I'm just gonna do this. What I do mean is that once I decided, there was never a hesitation.
Okay.
What I mean is like there was a particular day where I was like, okay, I have this opportunity to manage these Yes Theory guys. I'm getting paid really well at Shopify. I know that my goal has always been to be an entrepreneur. I'm not learning as much as I was anymore, like when I first started Shopify, and I feel like I've plateaued in what I'm learning. Then this seems like it has to be the next extension of me honestly seeking discomfort, putting myself into something that feels uncomfortable, that feels risky, but the results and the lessons that can come from it can be exponentially better than what I would happen if I just stayed in this comfortable
Mm,
job. And then I decided I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it part time like the opportunity first arose. I'm going to do it full time. I'm going to quit this job. I'm going to move out to LA. And then once I decided, there was no shit, did I make the wrong decision? Shit, should I change my mind? Shit, should I start part time again? It was like, it was done. I said I was going to do it. And then it just like, it's really weird to explain like what at least happens in my head, but there was never a second guess. And the same thing
okay.
happened when I was working at a shitty finance job when I graduated university, and I realized like, yo, I'm clocking in, clocking out, trading my time for money. Like this is bullshit. I want to
Yeah.
be an entrepreneur. And I said, okay. There was one particular day where I was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to, and I determined. I sat down and I was like, I'm gonna go get a job in sales, because sales is the best skill I can learn if I want to be an entrepreneur. And I don't give a fuck what it's gonna pay me. I just want to learn sales skills. And so
Wow.
I decided, I knew I was gonna quit the finance job. The next day, I was like, I went and I found an entrepreneurship conference. At the entrepreneurship conference, there was a startup called Shopify that was doing a little workshop there around sales. And so I attended it because I was like, now I'm going to get into sales. And I met someone in recruiting there, and it happened like that. It literally happened from one night, me being like, I'm quitting. That decision is made. I'm not going
Wow.
to stick around. I'm not going to be here for 6 months while I like apply to jobs. I'm fucking quitting. And so now I got to go find an opportunity in sales at a startup. And I think because my decisions have been so definitive in my own mind, I think honestly, like there's some shit within the world that just helps put things in place for me.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's kind of what I mean is like, once the decision is made in your mind and you're like, this is what's going to happen, life puts the opportunities ahead of you, in front of you, and then helps you get to that thing.
Wow, that's crazy. Most people try to run away from sales and get to anything out of sales. I had a sales job for 1 year, and I can definitely attest to that. Like the skills that it builds, and just the shit that you learn from sales is incredible. Like you can take that with you and apply it to so many different aspects of life. And entrepreneurial spirit is it works well with sales. I will definitely will say that.
100%. And that's what the thing was, right? Like I know, I've known I was going to be an entrepreneur since I like knew I wasn't going to be in the NBA.
Okay.
That was what I had deemed. Like as soon as I was like, all right, man, I'm not going to the NBA, which probably came later than it should have. It probably came at like 16, 17, where I was like, I'm not going D1. Like I should
Yeah.
probably give this up. And then from there it was like, everyone was like, what's your $1 million idea? Are you going to like start an app? Are you going to like, what's your idea? And it was like, I don't really know what my idea is, but I knew that there's a set of skills that I could learn that when the opportunity presented itself, I'd be ready. And I
Got
deemed the
you.
number one of that to be sales. And I think that's the number one thing that I would say for young people is like, depending on what you want to do or who you want to be or what you want to do with your life, just determine like, what are the skills? Like, what are the skills that I need to have in that position? And
Got
then
you.
what can I do today that, can develop those skills? And then do those things knowing that you're just doing them to gain the skills for that one thing. So that way it becomes very almost like 1 + 2 = 3 kind of in your mind. Like I joined Shopify in sales and I told them during my interview, and the first day I joined, I told my director, this is going to be the last job I ever have.
Oh
I'm going
shit.
to work here so I can develop sales skills, and then I'm going to go off and start my own business and be an entrepreneur. And I'm only working here so I can master sales. And once I feel like I've learned everything I have to learn, I'm out of here.
So you were
And
super transparent with them from the jump.
from the first interview ever, which I almost like, I remember saying those words and being like, you're a fucking idiot, you arrogant
You're
piece
not
of
gonna.
shit. They're not gonna fucking hire you. But to Shopify's credit, and I give them all the credit in the world, they were like, yeah, we don't expect you to be here for life.
That's
Like,
awesome.
they're also a stellar company that's like, we don't expect you to be here till you're 40. But if you're going to literally say that you are so motivated to master sales, dude, if you stay here for 3, 4 years, 2 years, 1 year and master sales, well, we've gotten our value out of you because you're going to fucking crush.
Yeah.
So they were very much like okay with that. And then the day I quit, went to my director and I was like, hey man, Mark, remember when I told you this is going to be the last place I ever work? And he's like, yeah. I was like, well, here's my notice. Like, I'm going to go off and do this thing in LA. And to
Yeah.
his credit, he was like, fuck yeah, dude. And I mean, we still have a great relationship.
That's awesome. I've heard of a lot of entrepreneurs even say that. Like they say like one of the recommendations that they would give to young entrepreneurs is to start off in sales. I think Mark Cuban said that. He's just like, they're like, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur? He's like, do sales, like start off in sales. And
$100%.
I think that's very, very important tool to have. Um, I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I started off a lot later than you did as far as pursuing being an entrepreneur. For me, a little bit of background on myself. I had a dream of being in the NFL, similar to your dream of being in the NBA. But the cards were stacked against me. I'm 5'10", white boy. It wasn't necessarily my future, but I still stuck on to that goal. I ended up actually playing college football, D1. I accomplished that, but the
Fuck yeah,
NFL
dude.
dreams weren't it's obtainable for me. I had limitations on my body. So getting started a little bit later in life, I kind of sometimes feel like I'm behind others that may have started when they're 18 or 20, where it's just like I graduated, I had all my passion into this one sport. I wanted to pursue that dream. And then once that ended, I felt like, man, there's so many people that have started when they were like 18 or 20, and here I am like 23, and I feel like I'm kind of behind the ball on that. Do you experience anything like that where you, because obviously you're surrounded with a lot of other entrepreneurs and a lot of other people that are succeeding in other areas of life. When you first started off on this entrepreneur journey, did you feel like you were behind anybody? And how did you deal with kind of just like not comparing your journey to somebody else's, I guess?
Hmm. Great questions. I did. That was what made me quit the finance job to go to Shopify, is because I started seeing friends that were being entrepreneurial, and
Mm,
I realized like, oh shit, this person is doing it with 24 hours in a day. And I was doing it with whatever minus the 8 hours I was clocking into this shitty fucking finance job. So I
right.
was like, I'm getting beat because they got more hours in the day to do this than I do. And so that was kind of where I was like, okay, I gotta learn skills. I can't be clocking, I can't be wasting 8 hours a day, because if I'm giving 8 hours of my time away, I don't give a shit what check you're giving me. It's not worth 8 hours.
Yeah.
And so it's not worth the knowledge I can attain within those 8 hours. So that kind of was like one of the times where I felt like, shit, I'm getting beat. I gotta make the most out of my 24. Um, and then after that, I think it became, I was always like the brighter, younger person in the room. I think now I'm starting to realize like I'm 27. I just turned 27, and I'm starting to see like these people that are 28 years old, 21 years old, 22 years old, that I'm like, damn, this kid's bright as
Yeah.
hell, and holy crap, I wasn't there when I was 21, 22. But I think I've always done a pretty good job. I don't know where it comes from, but like I've always had a level of confidence that never really needed to look at someone and be like, damn, I wish I had that, or damn, I wish I had whatever. Because I think every time a comparison like that comes to mind, like, damn, this kid's 23, he's done what? I always think like, so and so is 40. Like J.K. Rowling was 40 and wrote Harry Potter. You know what I mean?
True.
Like
Like
there's a lot of
Gary
people that
Vandercheck, he didn't start till he was like 40. Yeah.
exactly. So then I'm like, I'm still way ahead of that, and it happens for people at different times. Like I
Mm,
always think to myself, and I think this is very similar to Gary Vee. Like I always think to myself, like, yo, you might be broke as hell at 35, because you might have some shit happen. Your business might go under. You might get sued. You might lose all your money. You might have to start over at
a
35.
lot of people are in that situation right now.
Exactly. So like I,
Yeah.
I could have been in the live event business. Yes Theory could have been a live tour, and I could have been fucked right now. So
Yeah.
you never really know, right? And so I take it as it comes, and I think again one of the things that Gary Vee says is you can't, if the negative comments are getting to you, or like negative thoughts like that are coming to you, it also probably means that the positive thoughts are pumping you up too much, right? Like every
Yeah.
time someone tells me like, oh my god, you're this and this, I'm always like, I got to try to not let it gas my head up, because I'm like, if I believe that, then I'm also going to believe the person who's telling me I'm not shit. So
Okay.
I think it's all about having the internal belief in yourself, the internal confidence in yourself. I think that comes from building skill, not from fluff.
Got you.
And that's kind of like I'm a huge believer. Like people will come to me and be like, oh, I want to build, like, oh, you worked at Shopify, I want to build like this drop ship business and like sell whatever the fuck, like fake AirPods on thing, and I'm gonna run some Facebook ads. And I think there's certain skills that are built in that. Don't get me wrong, but like I'm very much like, well, that doesn't seem like a real business that you're going to start. That just seems like a get rich quick scheme. And so I think it's also about like, once you build the skills, you have the confidence in yourself. Like I can do this. I have leadership skills. I have sales skills. I have management skills. And then if you take all my money away, if you take everything that I own away, I still have those. You can never take those away, and I can
Yeah.
start to rebuild from day one, whether I'm 35 or 40 or 50. I have that belief in myself that I can do these things, and it's just a matter of when and how. It's not a matter of if.
Yeah. I think that's really important for people to hear, especially in this generation with like social media, because people's successes are all in your face. Like everybody knows that nobody posts like depressing things on social media or bad things going on in their life. So all you're seeing is everybody's successes, and it becomes easy to compare yourself to those people. But having that internal confidence, like you explained, and kind of blocking the external compliments or criticism, I think is really important for people to hear, especially in this generation.
Exactly, and I think that's like, it's about having also your own values and ethics that you're rooted to. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's like, I can look myself in the mirror and be like, I may not have $10 million in my bank account, but my mom and dad are hella proud of me. And I feel like I have loyalty. I have this strong sense of integrity that I can look myself in the mirror and be like, you're doing right by the things that like you haven't lost yourself.
Right.
And I think that's incredibly important, because if you're tying yourself to these metrics that are placed by external factors, then you're not judging yourself by what you think truly matters. I did this one exercise one time, and I mean, you should do it, and anyone who's listening should do it, is like write down, find a list of like virtues, right? Like loyalty, integrity, all these things. Find a list of virtues and go through that list and circle the ones that you think are the most important to you. Then go through that same list and circle the things that you think are most important to you if no one else knew you were doing them. Like, if no one else knew that you were being loyal, is that still the most important virtue to you? Like, is charitable, like helping, like generosity and like, is that still super important to you if no one in the fucking world knew that you were generous? And if you can truly do that, then you're like, holy shit, these are the things that matter to me. And they're always going to be different than the things you find strongest to you when the world knows. And that's okay. Like, we can do certain things because the world knows. It's not about being like your own siloed lone wolf that doesn't give a shit about anything that anyone thinks about you, but it's about recognizing where the boundary and that border lies. And I think really special things happen from that, because then you can be like, okay, I'm doing this because I want to do this. I'm doing this because this is important to me. I don't give a shit what people think about, me and my relationship with my family, but I know that, if my mom passes or my dad passes, I can look in the mirror and be like, while they were here, you gave them time of day, you did what you could. And that gives you the sense of like confidence and the happiness and the fulfillment to then be able to go through life like without any
what ifs.
What ifs or regrets. So I think that that's like, you live by your own standard. And I think it's just such a shame, whether it's career based or whether it's personal family based or whether it's whatever goal based, so many people are like living by someone else's fucking clock and someone else's rules, and they turn 50, 60 and they're like, it could be money, right? It could be like, oh, society tells me I gotta get a bunch of money, and then you turn 50 and you're like, I got a bunch of money, but I don't talk to my parents, I don't have love in my life, I don't have a strong friend group, I don't have health and fitness in my life, I don't have mindfulness, I can't come to peace with my mind. And so like, what is all this fucking money for?
Yeah.
The fuck was this? Like, who told me that this was supposed to answer all these things?
And
so I think that's the thing.
You see that story so many times too with successful people, whether it's celebrities or athletes, that were so focused on the goal at hand, or having the fame or having the money or having the great seasons, whatever sport they're at, and they were negligent to their family or negligent to their family life. It's so prevalent.
I want to almost take this back to where we started with Jordan, because like I love Jordan, and I look at Jordan as someone that has that will to win, that like competitive nature that like I think is I'm like both blessed with and then also cursed with, because like I lose and I fucking rampage and get mad, and I'm so competitive. But if you look at like Jordan's Hall of Fame speech, if you can Google it, YouTube it, go watch it.
Okay.
This man got inducted to the Hall of Fame. He could have used this opportunity to thank people. He could have used this opportunity to talk about things that would inspire people. He could have used the Hall of Fame opportunity to talk about civil, things and cultural, like stand up for his, for the African American community, or yada yada. He went up and he just talked about all the people who ever doubted him. He talked about all the people that he was sticking it into the face of, from the coach that cut him in high school to the reporters that said he couldn't. And it was very obvious, like, oh, this guy is holding on to a lot of fucking hate. And this guy is doing this out of a purpose of like proving people wrong. And it was very sad, to be honest, because it's like, oh, dude, you just need a hug.
Yeah.
Like, you're doing it for the wrong fucking reasons, man. And so like, that was another thing with Jordan where I was like, oh, damn, like if you're so much on this one thing, win, champions greatness, blah, 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 then you forget like, yo, it's also larger than this. Like, you get to the Hall of Fame speech and you realize, yo, your coach from high school doesn't give a fuck that he cut you and like you stuck it to his face and become the greatest of all time. Like, no one cares, dude. You're still just by yourself in this. Like, do it for bigger reasons. Because if you do it to prove people wrong, and you do it to like be like, look at all this shit I got, no one at the end of the day is going to care there.
Yeah, and that was super prevalent throughout Jordan's entire career. He was constantly finding motivation from players that were like talking shit or whatever the case may be. Like, that's where he's finding his motivation. He's like, all right, you're gonna talk shit, or, oh, okay, you're gonna say this about me. I'm going to show you on the court, and would just take over games. But he was constantly using that as motivation. There's a scene in one of the most recent episodes. Episode 7 and 8 might have got leaked, and I might have watched them already. So I mean, this episode will come out after the fact, but I don't want to ruin anything for you. But there's a scene, I won't be too descriptive of, in one of the playoff games, he actually made up an imaginary scenario where,
Mm.
I won't say the player, but one of the players uh outperformed him that game and told him like, nice game, in a condescending way, and he used that as motivation in the next game to like drop 40 and like absolutely murder the team and dominate that specific player. And in the documentary, um he finally says that never actually happened, and he was just literally using it as a psyche to motivate himself to win, which is insane. Like, he needed that motivation to become successful, or to like actually to be competitive, I guess you would say.
Yeah, yeah, which I think like is both good and bad, right? Like you can see the dangerousness in that because it's like, okay, well, you are now creating scenarios where people are hating on you so that you can get the motivation to make your team win.
Yeah.
Whereas like, does that mean that, you know, that if that works, then that's great. But also now you're creating this like fake thing. Like he might have finished that game. I don't know. I haven't seen the episode. He might finish that game and go up to that player and be like, "Man, fuck you! I told you I'm the best." And that guy's like, "What you talking about, dude?" That,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
like he might hold that scenario so realistically in his mind. But if he was able to like find motivation through a different place and find competitive nature through like, I want to see another ring on Steve Kerr's finger. I want Pippen to get the appreciation he deserves. I want Phil Jackson to have 6 rings on his goddamn finger, or on his goddamn hand. Like if those were the things, like you can find motivation from anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I think like I'll give you an example within my life. Like when I was running my marathon, or I wanted to run a marathon, I put out an Instagram story and I said, I want to run a marathon. Who thinks I can complete it? And I put a poll up on Instagram. And all the people that said no, I screenshotted it. And my plan was I'm gonna fucking run a marathon, and then I'm gonna message each one of these people
Oh
individually
shit.
and be like, fuck you, dude. I ran a fucking marathon in your fucking face. And as I started training, I talked to my therapist, and I told her that I was doing this. And she's like, you know, you're just going to run a marathon. You're going to message all those people. They're not even going to remember fucking voting on your stupid Instagram story. And I was like, you're fucking right. They're not going to remember. It's a fucking Instagram story. Who the fuck cares
Just that
about Zach
tap.
running a
Yeah.
marathon? Yeah, who cares? Like, also, they're going to just be like, good for you, dude. I'm proud of you. Like, what is that going to do? So that changed my goal for the marathon to I'm going to run a marathon and not tell social media. I didn't post one
Oh.
running picture. I didn't tell anyone I was going to San Francisco other than like my friends and family. I didn't tell social media. And I just went out and I did it. And I did it for me because I determined my why for doing it was that I didn't think I could, that I wanted to be able to check it off my bucket list, that I wanted to like feel like fitness and healthy living was like a thing within my life. And I wanted to redefine my own belief in myself that I can be a runner, even though I hated running. And so
Right.
that to me felt like, oh, I could still find this motivation. I can still find this competitiveness. I don't got to message these guys and be like, yo, fuck you. Because there's so many people, again, like Jordan, like you can get to the end of your career and be like, stick it to all of you. And everyone's like, dude, we're happy for you. Like, we didn't care. Why the hatred?
Yeah.
And so I find like very similar to Jordan, I had so much of that hate. The thing that drove me to so far, even to like here, um, was so fueled by like people telling me I couldn't, people always doubting me, people hating on me, my counselor saying I couldn't go to university, my mom saying I couldn't go to university, all these different people telling me I couldn't do shit. And then I realized that what got me here is not going to get me to the next place. Like
Yeah.
I can't use that same motivation that got me to
Very true.
today to get me to 30, 35, to where I want to be in my future. So you got to redefine and refine your motivations and inspirations. And I think you can learn from, honestly, the thing that I'm taking away from this Jordan documentary is it's a telltale sign of don't fall into the shit that he fell into. I can only imagine LeBron watching
Oh
this
yeah.
documentary and being like, I got to stick away from some of this shit. Like I got to
Mm-hmm.
do better than he did. And
Yeah.
he paved the path for me to be able to stand on his shoulders and not fall into these same traps and things that he fell into.
Yeah. And I think it all goes to like not having external motivating factors and having those internal motivating factors. It's, people call it the why, the quote unquote why. But
Yeah.
because what are you going to do when that external motivating factor isn't there? Like, what are you going to use for motivation? If there's always something external that has to constantly motivate you, when it's not present, then you're kind of fucked. And I remember I had a coach in practice one time who actually is a perfect example of this. We talked to we were talking to our coaches. We usually like listen to pregame music during warmups, right? Pregame music during practice to get us hyped and to constantly like motivate us to work out or whatever. Then we lost one week, and then the next week there was no music. And I think for the first few days, no one kind of noticed. But then after a while, like all the players were like, "Coach, what's up with the music? Like, you want to listen to fucking Migos? Want to listen to like blah blah blah?" He's just like, "Nah, like you guys lost. Like, you guys can listen to all the music you want now, but once it's game time, there's no music coming. What are you gonna do to find that motivation? Like, it's you can't take your headphones with you on the field." So it kind of goes back to that. Like, you don't have you need to find that motivation internally rather than finding it through music. Or I think even David Goggins.
I was about to bring it up.
Yeah,
Joe Rogan
he said
and David
something.
Goggins.
Yeah, he said something similar to that, where like he doesn't.
If you run with music, you're cheating.
Exactly. Joe Rogan says all the time. He's just like, running it with headphones is cheating. I still fucking hate it, but I see exactly what he's saying. I see the concept of it. And yeah, if you guys haven't listened to it, you guys probably look it up. Joe Rogan and David Goggins podcast, but he mentions it quite often. But yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So we're running short on time. There's a lot we could cover, but we could probably go all day if we did that. So I guess like one of my last questions is just what's next for you and One Day Entertainment?
I think just diversifying from a sense of I wanna like go after all the things that seem fun to me. Like I want to get into like TV production. I want to hold on, get a call.
No worries.
I want to get into TV production. I want to get into potentially one day getting into like sports management. I want to get into TikTok. I want to get into the music industry. I want to get into like owning a record label. There's so many things that fascinate me. I want to get into like being a better philanthropist and like activist and like doing things for the causes that I care about and are close to home for me. And that I don't necessarily have a particular thing, but I know that my goal with One Day Entertainment is to make it a very well diversified media entity that range in so many different places of the entertainment industry. So I'll say that, just kind of keeping it vague, and then I guess we'll see what kind of happens.
You're just getting started, right? You haven't scratched the surface.
I hope not. We'll see. I hope not. I mean, I look at people like David Geffen, and I look at people like Scooter Braun, and I want to like, they don't have any one particular talent that defines them. They don't have a particular venture that defines them. They don't have a particular industry that defines them. They've done everything that's fascinated them, and they've done it with the consistent inner sense of like integrity, value, and like their own morals. And I just want to be able to do that. I want to like hold my own self and then apply it to different places that I find fascinating. So that's kind of my guiding light through it, is like, as long as I know who I am and I know what means a lot to me, then I can go after the things that I find myself like fascinated by, which right now I would say the biggest thing I'm fascinated by is the music industry. And I just took on an artist, his name is Brandon Burnett. And so I've been helping him out. And that's been a really exciting journey for me.
Awesome. I love it. What about for Next Theory? What's next for Yes Theory?
Podcast launches early June in partnership with Headspace.
Ooh.
So go listen to it if you're listening to it and it's past that timeline now. And what else is next for them? They just started a second YouTube channel called Yes Theory Plus yesterday. So it's live by the time you're hearing this. Oh, wow. Which will have hopefully more creative formats, maybe different guests, just a lot more of like a different approach that's not the particular Yes Theory format, but just more experimentative in storytelling and directive. So those are two pretty big initiatives that we've launched, and should be live by the time anyone hears this.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. Very exciting things happening. I guess the last question, where can people find you on social? Where can people follow your journey? Plug yourself with anything you got.
So, well, everyone can follow at Yes Theory, at Yes Theory on all platforms. And then for me, I'm Zack, ZACK, .the creator on Instagram. And then you can hit me on email if you want to chat with me there and have any questions at zack@one spelled out.com. So feel free to hit me up. If you guys put Ambiance podcast in the subject line, I'll make sure I answer.
Hell yeah. Awesome. I love to hear it. Awesome, Zack. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to talk with me. This was amazing. So many gems and knowledge dropped. You have an exciting future ahead of you. I'm really excited to follow along. And yeah, have a good rest of your Mother's Day. Everyone tell your moms you love them, even though it's not Mother's Day when you listen to this. Yeah.
Still tell them.
Still tell them. Exactly. All right, Zack, I appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.
Much love, bro.